Welcome to Full Circle. I'm Suzanne McAllister. Thanks for joining us today. Well, death cafes are springing up all over the world. Coming up in this half hour, we'll meet a life coach who will talk about how it's important to discuss death so that we can live life more authentically now. But first, here to talk about a very daunting task, and that is downsizing, we have Rita Woll. Rita Woll is a professional organizer and move manager, and she's here to give us some helpful hints on how to right size. It's great to have you here today, Rita.
Thank you for the invitation.
So Rita, many people, as you know, statistically don't start downsizing until there's a death or a crisis in the family. Tell us some of the benefits of why we should start that process now.
Well, one, I like to call the home your nest. And when your nest is in order, emotionally, mentally, and in your heart, you feel good and organized, and you're able to operate on a daily basis.
I think that's a great philosophy to have, but you know, some people are at a point in their life where they're just overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that they have. What do you recommend in terms of ways to get started sorting and processing all of that?
Well, they can start with their clothes closet. So as the Goodwill man says, you know, if you put something in, you've got to take something out. When you change your seasonal clothes, go through your clothes. Clothes that are too big, too small, just put it in a donation bag and take it to your favorite charity, including shoes, handbags, and all sorts of things.
So we really need to be realistic many times in terms of what we need and how much we really have.
Exactly. In doing this for 6 years now, I have found that people have too much, and they don't even use half the things that they have. And many times there's clothing in people's closets still with the tags on that could have been an impulse purchase, and that money could have been used for something else that was needy, but we all do that once in a while. It's kind of fun to have impulse purchases as well. But you know, what's really important, as I have uncovered and discovered working in this business in right sizing, is really, it comes down to happiness, joy, and good health in your life. And the rest of the stuff is just stuff.
I'm so glad you've said that, because I think so many times we think that that happiness and joy comes from something, but it comes from within.
Correct. And basically it's family. And being with your family and having time with your family. So when people come down to right sizing, go, oh my gosh, I can't give away my dining room set or my dishes that was my Great Mary's. You know, they haven't used it and it's been sitting in the china cabinet. But when it comes time to sell it, and unfortunately right now, porcelain china is not very valuable in some cases, depending upon what it is. But I talk to people about return on investment. You know, you've had holiday parties with those dishes, maybe Christmas, New Year's, birthdays, anniversaries. And so after, you know, 10, 15, 20, 40 years, you have your return on investment. You've used those dishes and they've brought great joy because you've had a family gathering around the table.
And now it's time to pass it along, but many people have no idea what the value is or the true value. And you mentioned that in many cases, the value is not as great as we think it would be. How do we go about determining the true value of our items?
Well, in today's market, depending upon what it is, everything fluctuates. Right now, antiques aren't very valuable in some instances, and everything is in trends. Right now, the trend is early 1900s to mid-modern century to Art Deco 50, 60 look. So the furniture that was from the 70s, 80s, and 90s is not highly wanted. It's not wanted by the baby boomer generation, nor our children, the XY generation. So as far as valuation, everything fluctuates. So it's really what buyers are willing to pay for it.
So why should we be very careful about the person that we engage to help us? You are a certified move manager, you have credentials. Why should we be very careful about that?
Well, one of the things is I'm a member of the National Association of Senior Move Managers, and we abide by a code of ethics. And our ethics is that people hire us sometimes in a crisis, and we come into a home and we get to know each other very quickly. So we learn about your past, your present, and your future fast. And we help you develop that next chapter or move you or right size you to what fits good for you. So we come into your home as maybe an adopted daughter. So we come into your home and we want you to know that even though we have insurance, we're bonded, but truly we have an interest in a servant's heart on giving you the confidence that we uphold confidentiality, because we do see documents and your personal items and your heirlooms that we honor and respect because they're yours.
Well, that is a process, and it's important if you are going to be thinking about this downsizing process that you take action. When we come back, we'll give you some helpful tips on that. Don't go away. Stay with us. Welcome back to Full Circle. We're continuing our conversation with Rita Woll about the benefits of downsizing. And you know, you don't have to wait for a crisis to begin downsizing. In fact, if you're not even leaving your house for another 10 years or so, it never hurts to clean out those closets right now, right, Rita?
Exactly.
So what we're talking about is taking action. I have some information from your material that we need to organize our life documents, visit a financial planner and an attorney, have family discussions, inventory our items, and select a charity if we would like to donate our items. Why is that family discussion so important? Let's hone in on that one.
Usually I get the phone call from families when there's a crisis and there has been no planning. It's important to discuss with your children. Unfortunately, we don't know when we're going to get sick, or we have a fall, or we have a stroke, and then it's panic. But if you have these discussions with your children, if you have, or family members, where you want to go. Do you want to go to a retirement community? Do you want to age in home? If you want to age in home, what kind of caregivers do you want to have? How would that affect your daily life activities? Unfortunately, you know, we're all going to die someday, but talking about death and how do you want to have your funeral arrangements? Do you want to have a life celebration? Just many things that we try and not talk about because it's a sad thing. And yes, aging is sad. It's going to happen to all of us. But how can we prepare our home and have that conversation with our children so they know what to do with our household inventory as well?
And I'm so glad that later on in the program we are going to be talking to a life coach about death and the importance of talking about death. But staying on the topic of preparing our home, whether it's because we're downsizing, right-sizing, or if we have a move to another city, we know the importance of staging. And I know you've got this great picture of this clean, open, airy living room. That's the end result of what you can help with, right, Rita?
Absolutely. That's one of our services, and I do recommend that people do stage their home. If people have been in their homes for 30, or really 10 or more years, and they've got the old traditional flower wallpaper, in today's market, buyers want to move in buyer ready. And yes, it does cost a little bit of money to have your house updated, but it's worth it. So it's worth it that your house is on the market a very short time, and you don't have to keep lowering the price. And by having your house professionally staged, it will sell very quickly.
And the less stuff we have to carry from one place to the other,
exactly.
we have that happiness factor.
Exactly, and also it will cost less for the move.
Very good. So in summary, Rita, we've covered a lot of ground in terms of downsizing, right-sizing, taking action, having that family discussion. What final point would you like to make in terms of how this process can be one that doesn't have to be so daunting?
True. It's something that aging parents and their children can do together. You can wait for a blizzard day and start going through your drawers, your closets, your cabinets, your attic, your basement, your garage, and find out, do I really need this? If you've had something 2 years or more, you've never touched it, you're not using it, that's repurpose it.
All right. Well, our guest has been Rita Woll. We'd like to thank her for her helpful information. You can go to our website to find out more about Rita and her services. She is a professional organizer and move manager. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And when we come back, we will talk about the death cafes. Stay with us. Perhaps you've heard of a phenomenon that's spreading across the world. It's called a death cafe. Here to tell us all about this is Elaine Voci. She is a PhD, a life coach, and a facilitator of the death cafes. Welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Tell me what a death cafe is, because I think people think you can just go to a restaurant and what?
Well, a death cafe is a conversation for people who are 18 years and older. It is a public conversation, and it's for people who simply are there because they know intentionally by coming to that event they're going to talk about death. And they're going to talk about it with peers, with people from different walks of life. They're going to have an opportunity to express some of their concerns, ask questions perhaps that they have, and know that they're going to be heard, they'll be listened to, people will respond, and it's in a confidential setting. I might mention the cafe represents the delicious desserts and tea and coffee that we share together as well. And that part of it is meant to convey a sense of comfort and ease so that people can focus on a topic that most of us regard as fairly painful or perhaps even scary in some way.
So you really are providing an open forum for people to talk about whether it's their fears or their wishes or ask questions, but you're not a grief support group. I think it's important to mention that.
Yes, it's not a bereavement group. It's not a grief counseling group. It's for people who know that they're going to die one day and want to be fully present in their lives and want to talk about death, kind of get more comfortable with it so that they can then think about the flip side of the coin, which is life. How do I want to live? How do I want to conduct myself knowing that my time is limited?
You know, when I was in my 20s, all my siblings were together and we watched our mother die. And it was a sad time, but it was really revealing in terms of, you know, this life does end. And to see your own mother die, I think it has put a unique spin on how I have lived my life. Because as you say, when you get an acceptance of death, you can live life differently.
That's a really good story. It's one example, I think, of how knowing death, experiencing death early in our lives is really a gift of sorts, even though it's painful to lose someone that we love. But to experience that person preparing and going through their process and their journey, being part of it, being present to it, can change the rest of your days, as it obviously has yours.
Absolutely. So why do you think this phenomenon, it started in Britain, John Underwood is the founder, it's spread to Australia, to Europe, and all over. Why do you think many people are really grasping this whole concept of the death cafe?
You know, I think it's part of the kind of global cultural zeitgeist that's happening right now, and boomers are playing a huge part. Just a little tongue-in-cheek, it's been said that the boomer generation is one that's never met a ritual or ceremony that they didn't love. You know, so they're a generation that embraces this business of really coming together, fully present, mindfully, consciously, and making some different choices. Whereas previous times, I think, especially where death is regarded, we've tended to want to push it away, keep it at a distance, push it in a corner so that we don't have to think about it. But the boomer generation, as it's approaching aging and their own death and dying, is really changing it, saying, no, let's talk about it, let's prepare for it. You know, they changed birthing at home, they changed weddings and ceremonies, getting married on the beach, you know, flowers in the hair. I mean, all of those cultural events were altered by the boomers. And so it's no surprise that we'd be thinking about death and dying in a new way.
Yes, it's more the celebration of life rather than the funeral, correct?
Yes.
So as a facilitator of these, and also you are a volunteer for hospice, you are a PhD, what are some of the issues that people bring up when it is on this topic of death? Can you share some of those with us?
I'll tell you, the issue that I see that is the most pronounced for people coming to the death cafes and in the bereavement group is the ability to not feel alone, to come together with a group of people. Strangers can be connected with one another very personally, very intimately in a cafe where it's confidential. And you're there along with everybody else to intentionally, purposefully spend your time talking about death. That business of feeling understood. I almost always have someone in their 80s who comes. I'd say the predominant gender is female in these groups, but they want to be heard. They want to feel okay about talking about this, and they always are so gratified by the feeling that they're not alone.
Right.
That this is something they're sharing with other people. In the bereavement groups, what that has underscored for me is how, because of this fear of death, how lonely it can be to be a bereaved person. And the shunning that goes on, because it's almost as if other people, their neighbors, their distant friends, even people in their faith communities, can avoid them because they're afraid they're going to make them cry or they're going to feel badly, when in fact that loneliness can be assuaged by human connection, by someone asking and genuinely wanting to know, how are you doing?
And sometimes that connection, especially with something as unknown as death, I mean, we know it's there, but we don't understand it completely. And our faith does give us that sense of our next life, our purpose. But sometimes connecting with perfect strangers is easier than sitting down with your family. Have you found that to be true?
Exactly true, yes. In fact, the two women, the one who's 81 that's coming this Sunday, and the one that came, the first one in July, both have said the same thing, independently of one another. I want to talk about death. My kids won't talk about it with me. They say, Mom, you're being morbid. Well, really what's morbid and strange is not wanting to talk about something that we all know is part of life.
Sure. In fact, there was an article in the paper about you, and it said 10 reasons why I want to talk about death and why we should talk about it. What are some of those reasons other than ones that you've already shared with us?
Well, you know, we've kind of hinted at this, but when two people, strangers or family, begin to talk about death and begin to share their feelings, their concerns, their plans, there is a kind of a sacred space they enter with one another. And I think those kinds of conversations can be so meaningful, can be so purposeful, and can affect both individuals deeply. So the conversation itself is very special. Ellen Goodman, by the way, has what's called the Conversation Project. This is a national project that was begun 2 years ago when she lost her mother. And it's about those things your previous guest talked about and about what we're talking about now. Families getting together and covering that terrain so that they're prepared emotionally and in other ways.
Well, I think you've definitely helped us become more prepared. I'd like to thank Elaine Voci for being here today. She is She co-facilitates a bi-monthly bereavement group of widows and widowers, and she is a part of the Association of Death Education and Counseling. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, we are back with more after this.
Stay tuned. Musical Showcase is coming up next. And now, here's our musical showcase.
Well, thanks for joining us. I'm Suzanne McAllister, and we'll see you next time, Full Circle. Now, here's Eric Wiegand performing a Beatles tune for No One.
Your day breaks, your mind aches. You find that all her words of kindness linger on when she no longer needs you. She wakes up, she makes up, she takes her time and doesn't feel she has to hurry. She no longer needs you, and in her eyes you see nothing. No sign of love behind the tears cried for no one. A love that should have lasted years. You love her, you need her, and yet you don't believe her when she says her love is dead. You think she needs you. And in her eyes you see nothing. No sign of love behind the tears cried for no one. A love that should have lasted years. You stay home, she goes out. She says that once she had a friend, but now he's gone, she doesn't